done for me lately? It's Coons. What have y'all done for us lately? And if there's no answer, the only thing we owe them.
Welcome back to the Academia Report. And this is Q, myself, and Professor Drea, man. Oh gosh, woo! It's been a lot going on. But last week we had mentioned the Out of Bounds initiative, and it has really picked up steam. And anybody that wants to go back on our commentary on our show last week and how we felt as though that the NAACP and the Congressional Black Caucus was wrong in their assessment and in their recommendation that Black athletes should leave the SEC to go to HBCUs. And I thought about it, and I forgot to mention that what most people don't realize is Alabama has the most as HBCUs.
Mm-hmm.
Professor Drea is a resident of Alabama. So when you understand that these universities survive off of endowments, you will understand how hard it is. Professor Drea taught at a HBCU. She's an HBCU graduate. You will understand how these universities are not cash cows. And when you ask these young men and women to make these sacrifices that you should be making because you're the one saying that you stand for what you stand for, it's a little disingenuous and not planned and not thought out. Malcolm X, everybody likes to quote Malcolm X. One thing that he said was, we don't have a people problem, we have an organizational problem, in so many words. So, Professor Drea, we're going to take a shift. Sometimes we talk about a lot of things which are current, but one of the things that we want to discuss and be able to get a grasp of is understanding the Black home ownership, understanding how in our families, definitely those, your family's originally from Alabama before y'all moved up north.
Mm-hmm.
And likewise with both sides of my family, Brunswick, Georgia, and Stewart County, Lumpkin, Georgia, is that when they all moved up north, Black home ownership was like the thing to do.
Right.
You had to buy a home for your family. A lot of them had big families, one of 6, one of 7, one of 8. And a lot of the Black families that were, making this migration up north, had big families, so they needed a home.
Mm-hmm.
They had to figure it out. So we're going to discuss Black home ownership, where Professor Drea says roots, and rebuilding. Very interesting title Professor Drea came up with. And she did some research on Black home ownership and getting us to understand what it meant, how significant it was. And nowadays you hear so many people talk about, generational wealth. And when you think about the land and the wealth transfers that happen
Mm-hmm.
throughout generations, most of that is a home, because homes, you don't lose money. 9 times out of 10, when you buy a home, you put equity in your home,
Mm-hmm.
and that transfer from your house to your descendants or you getting your house from your ancestors, or so passed down tradition, having a home was major.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a major graph when you even when you look at how we got shut out of the Homestead Act,
Mm-hmm.
and that's a whole nother topic that Professor Dre and myself discussed prior.
Right.
You start to realize why owning your land and owning your property and owning your house was so significant. So, Professor Dre, you're going to lead us tonight on this discussion. I'm going to ask you some questions based on what you say, and we're just going to have this discussion in reference to Black home ownership, roots, roofs, and
Rebuilding.
rebuilding.
Yes. So what's up, everyone? This is going to be a great topic, and I did a lot of research on it. Like, I'm big on Black home ownership, and I'll tell you a little bit about my history and why it's essential why we talk about it. Because I am a fourth generation homeowner. I'm proud to say that, not to say it in a bougie way or to put anybody down. My great grandparents, like I said, my family's from Escambia County, Alabama, which is South Alabama. So you're talking about my great grandparents, like late 1800s, early 1900s. My great grandparents, was born. So pretty much where my great grandparents on my mother's side, they inherited home. My great grandfather did. So not only a home, but 20 acres of land, in which we still have in my family today, which is called air property, HEIR property. So the cool thing about air property is, my third cousin, he pays the taxes on the property, and anybody from that lineage of the Daily, that's my mom's maiden name, the Daily lineage, we can, let's say if I say, hey, I want to build a home on it, anybody from that heritage, that lineage can build a home. So I have, like, my cousin has a home on there, a few of my cousins do, and then like I said, if I want to say I want to do something with the property, I can, as long as I get permission from my cousin. And then so my grandmother, my mom's mom, pretty much like bought a piece of land right across from our family's land. So my uncle and my cousins, they kind of have like a family compound. So if, let's say if I want to build something on there, I can, because the land was passed down to my mom and her brothers. And, my parents migrated to Boston. Back in the day, you moved from Alabama, the South, to Boston, probably with a family member who's already up north. You're getting your money together. And then also, too, you're like, hey, I want to have a piece of my own, home. So that's what my parents did. They stayed with my great aunt for a little bit, lived in a few apartments, stacked their money, bought a house. And so many of my uncles and aunts, like on my dad's side, they moved. It's about like 20, 30 family members. My parents helped, come to Boston. They all own homes there. So I'm very proud of being a homeowner. I thought it was gonna I thought it was gonna be a lot. It is a lot. You have to buckle down and be disciplined when it comes to your money. And I always tell people who I know that's college educated, who have, some degrees, if you're making, I'm gonna say, this is me, $85,000, you should be owning a home or two. You should not be renting. But I understand renting. I used to be a renter. Sometimes it's not for the renting, it may be for convenience for people because they probably don't want the responsibility. They may live in a major city that's killing them on the rent. In the home, let's say the homes are like average 300, $400,000. But that's when you have to really transition your mind to say, do I want to live, let's say, in a major city like Boston? In Boston, you have to make $120,000 a year to live comfortably. It's probably more now. I think San Francisco, you got to make like $150,000, and the homes there are like $450,000 average. So you have to really think about home ownership. Is that something you want to do? Especially, like I said, coming from being a Black person, yes, you may not cannot get your mortgage through a bank traditionally. You may have to look at a mortgage company. So I think so many times we don't have these conversations because people are not serious, people are not mature, and also too, it's a big, like, when you are a homeowner, and you could attest to this, Q, you have a lot of power and rights. Like, I can go down, I'm paying taxes. I can go down to my city
Yeah.
hall. I have did this because the house was across from me. It was vacant for a minute. the grass was high. I was like, hold on, wait, no, because this is gonna bring the property taxes down. Also, too, you got snake. Where I live at is very busy. You got snakes and all these rodents. Somebody need to clean this area up. So you have a lot of power, even with the school systems. I don't have children yet. I support the school systems here, and like my taxes go there. So I'm going to make sure that you know who I am, and I want to know where my taxes are going. And I think a lot of times we don't take these things seriously, even if our our ancestors or our parents, God forbid, they may own a home. Then they die off. I have seen people, one of my dad's best friends, to be honest with you, like he lived legit like down the street from my dad, and he used to live next door to us in Boston, and they both bought their homes at the same time, down here in Alabama. He died, his best friend died, his kids was living in Detroit, sold their house, and the house was brand new inside for $20,000,
Mm.
and went back to Detroit and living in a rooming house, not to put their business out there. I would be moving to Alabama, but people think, oh, Alabama is so slow, it's so racist, and this, that, and the third. You can live a really dope life
So let
for.
me ask you. Let me ask you because you gave us a lot, right? You gave us a lot. Let's. So when you talk about, and I don't want people that may be listening to us to think that we're giving them financial advice or real estate advice. We're not giving them real estate advice. We're just
No.
having a conversation about Black home ownership, roots, and rebuilding, and understanding what your grandparents, parents, anybody that migrated north, especially, or migrated west, coming from like Mississippi down south, and even went towards California. What was their goal? Their goal, like, was be what we call upward mobility, and like you said, coming up north, getting their self together, getting money. Like I can speak for my grandfather. My grandfather had the third grade education, and
Hmm.
he still didn't use a third grade education as an excuse. When he came up north, he had kids with him, and he had kids with him from Chicago, and then kids when he got to New Jersey, more kids, and he bought a home. Him and his wife was able. My grandmother was able to buy a home. So when we talk about it, we're talking from a practicality standpoint.
Hmm.
So I don't want anybody that may be listeners to feel like we're wagging our finger at you, maybe
Right.
because you can't afford to buy a home. Because we know in a lot of cases you may feel like you're being axed out. So, Drea, back to what you said. So your cousin that basically is the steward
Hmm.
of y'all property on that 20 acres. So
Hmm.
he understood the assignment, as people would say, passed down from lineage. Like, look, this is what we're gonna keep in our family. Anybody that want to build on our land is able to build on our land.
Exactly. And when no one's not building on the land, they also lease out or rent out parts of the land to grow soybean, corn, and other produce as well.
Hey,
So
Londa.
good evening. So that's what the land is being built for. So my cousin, who is the stewardship, like you said, he's stewarding it well. His father and my great grandfather were brothers. So like I said, they decided every generation. So when he passed on, because he's way in his 80s, it will be somebody else taking over to pay the taxes. So the family's making money based off of, okay, we're leasing this, we're renting it out to other folks to grow produce on there. So you have to be, like you said, a good steward of your resources to keep land. You're talking about 100+ years in my family, so
Mm-hmm.
that's all we know. When we have our family day, when we have just things like they can say, okay, that's the Daly's land. That's where they can go and have gatherings and things of that nature. So yeah, you have things to do. Go ahead.
And you see, and I in urban communities, let's just say in the communities that we come from, like predominantly not, and we're not going to talk about up north. I mean,
Mhm.
in the south where our families are from,
Right.
but up north, you see where in the urban communities, what a lot of people may not realize from our generation, though a lot of those communities got decimated with 95,
Mhm.
with what they called urban renewal. So we may have been living in public housing, or like I said, if your folks did what they would consider the American dream, they were able to purchase their home definitely in them 70s, and they didn't have credit. They went there with cash, and this was like, I want my house.
Right.
They bought mattress under the pillow and bought a home. So when you think about our generation, and a lot of us that do own homes, or those that don't own homes, how can I say, in the urban community, you have a lot of like being able to buy your home. You may buy city property, have all these programs where you can buy a home. I think that's one of the biggest unknowns for most people that may live in certain places is the programs that's available for new home buyers.
Exactly.
I think that a lot of times, and even like you said, at a certain point, you do need to make a certain amount of money. But if you have one or two people that may make decent money, they may think in the back of their mind that they can't own a house that's, I'll just say for, Jersey and, up in Boston, 300,000. And that's on the low end, right?
Right.
They may feel like they can't own a home, or they don't make enough to own a home. And a lot of these cities and municipalities do have a lot of first-time home buyer programs. What do you think that is more of you don't know what you don't know, or you just automatically don't think that you're eligible for the home?
I think it's a hybrid. I think it's both, because I think a lot of people don't know about the first time home buyer programs, and I think a lot of times too, some people are afraid because, like I said, it's a big responsibility to go and get pre-qualified. Because what does that mean? You gotta have your credit cleaned up. You gotta know what you're gonna qualify for. You gotta even start thinking about what neighborhoods you want to live in. You just got to really be responsible when it comes to your credit. And like you said, this is a disclaimer. We're not giving out, any tips, just some things that probably have worked for us. I know when I was living back on the East Coast, and I had took a first home buyers course, and I took a course on single home and also owning a 2-3 family house. That's what we call it in Boston. And so I was like, okay, let me take both courses. And I learned so much. I learned how to clean up my credit by myself, because a lot of times people think, oh, I need to go to a credit repair person. Nah, a lot of times you just got to be honest with yourself. Go pull up your credit report, which is free every year, and see, okay, what am I spending? What do I need to taper down? What do I need to send out letters to the creditors? Because it may be some bills that's not even yours. I learned so many different things, from how to ask, negotiate, the closing costs, or even how to even get a home. You don't even have to have that 20%. A lot of times the buyer or the seller can pay that off for you, your deposit. So it's so many things I had learned from taking that course, and of course from my parents, but I needed to take that course because things have changed from when my parents had bought their home. And so I think a lot of times people just don't know. I think a lot of times on the other end, people are afraid too, because they're like, hold on, I make X amount of money. What you mean I can't touch that money or go buy new furniture when you're in the process, being approved and this, that, and the third. And I also put this caveat in there too. When you do get into your home, like for real, keep your credit up. You never know, you need to, finance your HVAC system or whatever the case is. So, and just because you're offered $500,000 loan doesn't mean you got to take off $500,000. So I think a lot of times is we're miseducated, when uneducated. And like we said, there's no sneak diss to anybody who, let's say they're coming from public housing. They may not know because their parents never owned a home or their grandparents never owned a home, right? And they're like, hey, I could take the Section 8 certificate and, look into home ownership. You got a lot of programs for that. Or what's even a homestead? Like when I bought my home, it was like, oh, you eligible for homestead, this, down, and third. I'm like, oh, sign me up for everything. So for real, I'm like, sign me up for everything. But we don't know those things.
And that's one of the issues. And I know that we seen how, like, at a certain point in the country, like redlining, not be able to get the appraisal, getting appraisal if you do own a home, getting a low appraisal. So when you're trying to buy a home and you're trying to go to a certain neighborhood, You know, they may not want to shop this area. This realtor may not want to shop this area, and a lot of times we may take offense to it and say, "Oh, they don't want to shop this area because I'm black,
Mhm.
or I'm younger black,
Mhm.
or I'm a female, or two
Right.
females, or two." Nowadays, you have to consider all the things of all the options,
Absolutely.
and not realize that this realtor may be really on your side and understand what you need, and maybe trying to stir you out of an area that could be a little crazy. One of
Right.
the things that I noticed, and you always hear this, and I really wish that in certain words in the English language, definitely that affect the black community. It is about 4 or 5 words that I think that we just need to get rid of. And one of them is affordability.
Yes.
Because this word has been so tricky and so problematic for us, is that we don't understand, or we don't seem to really get that. We think that our elected officials, people, decision makers, are shutting us out of opportunities.
Mhm.
But the fact may remain that times is getting different. Times people are moving, people are progressing.
Right.
So that particular home, and I know right now people are really struggling with being able to quote unquote afford just to pay rent, or
Mhm.
it might be cheaper to own a home than it is to be a renter.
Right.
You know, how do we get to? Let me ask you, how do we get to understand the difference of I I can't afford. I got to step up my game. I got to have a game plan, and not be to the point where I feel like we're being gentrified.
Mhm.
What would be your advice from living in one? Hey, Dara, she said twin energy. What would be your advice from living in a big city like
Mhm.
Boston and understanding that word affordability, and then like living in a place like Alabama and understanding, I got some land down there, I got some people down there that's
Mhm.
okay, but now I want to buy a home in Alabama.
Right. I think I think people need to be educated and stop being so ignorant about the South. If you want to move to the South, and the most homeowners, black homeowners, live in the South. The top two cities that most black home ownerships that exceed over 50% is Atlanta and Birmingham. I live 45 minutes outside of Birmingham, and if you live in a city, do y'all understand how much grant money they have for first home buyers? And I was looking at the prices with homes versus like rent there, and I was like, yo, you might as well buy a house
Hmm.
versus getting this. Because I keep talking, I don't know, where you live at, but I know so many cities that got these luxury apartments that's trash because they was hurry up and put together. Me and you could put together a luxury apartment by going to Home Depot or Lowe's and just fixing the aesthetics, right? And they falling apart. Versus let's say, okay, let me get my money together. Sometimes, and I'm gonna keep it real with y'all, you may have to move back in with your family members. That's what I did when I moved from the East Coast. I lived upstairs from my mom and my stepdad and stacked my money and got pre-qualified. I was kind of nervous. I was like, "Oh, do I make enough money?" And made well enough more money to say, "Hey, I'm gonna open up the floodgates of where I want to go." But I think so many times when we think about affordability and think about the neighborhood you want to live in, sometimes yeah, you may have to live in a neighborhood in which it's a mixed income or it's mixed, because once again you got to think about property taxes. you know who certain things can bring your property taxes down, in which no one doesn't want to live in that neighborhood. Then like you say, here we go with the redlining, right? Then sometimes it's a benefit to live in a area that is, the property taxes may be a little bit more because the school system is a little bit better. You're going to get better resources. And I'm gonna tell y'all this quick tip real quick. A lot of people don't like to hear this, but a lot of times, when you live in these quote unquote urban neighborhoods that's, I don't want to say run down, but that's like, let's say, not on its way of being gentrified, you're gonna pay more on utilities. You pay more on everything because of, you got the abandoned cars. you got unkept, homes, abandoned homes. You don't want to live in an area in which, let's say, one day you build enough equity, or you're like, you know what, this is my starter home. I want to sell it or rent it out and go live elsewhere. Those homes are redlined. Those areas are like, it's like non-desirable. People do not want to live there. So but sometimes we gotta start somewhere, right? And it's okay. It's okay. It's okay if we start somewhere. So it's just like it's okay when you think about affordability, and you can always negotiate your house price. And I think a lot of times people are afraid about that as well. But I think we got to get out this urban renewal and thinking, oh, people are pushing this out. Sometimes you don't want undesirables. And I'm not talking about this. I'm talking about mentality, right? To bring down your property or bring down the neighborhood because of just the victimhood mentality, or oh, we can't do better, this is the only thing we can do. You can clean up trash around your house, you can mow the yard, especially for the elderly folks. And sometimes people, they stuck where they live at because they can't do any better, or maybe they own their house for 50, 60 years, and they decided, I don't pay for this house, I'm just paying for the taxes. Or even your taxes exempt when you're 65 years old here in Alabama or older, your taxes are exempt from paying from the house. So it's just
To
a lot.
give you that what I like to call attachment, investment, and stake. Even if, like you said, even if you do happen to rent, feel like you're invested in where you live at. Feel like you're attached. Feel like you got a lot of stake in understanding. Making sure your neighborhood or whatever is safe. But I did do some research, and you would be happy. Its basic sources is Federal Reserve, U.S. Census Bureau, Urban Institute, and the Pew Research. So I did like this 70-year research, right?
Hmm.
1960 black home ownership, 38%. White home ownership, 64%. 1970s, 42% black home ownership. White home ownership, 66%. 1980s, 44%. White home ownership, 70%. 2004 was our peak, Black Americans' peak, 49% home ownership,
Mm.
76% white home ownership.
Mm-hmm.
2016, this was after the crash and all that stuff, 42% home ownership for black home ownership,
Mm-hmm.
72% white home ownership, 30% difference. And as of right now, 45 to 46% home ownership to 74 to 75% home ownership for our counterparts, which is
Mm-hmm.
a 28 to 30% difference. So it really, based off of this information, it hasn't changed. The
Right.
gap is still the gap.
Mm-hmm.
And I have some factors in it that I want to ask you about. And you will be perfect to ask these factors as somebody who really understands academia. And one of the factors is high student debt. Explain how, when someone is career orientated like yourself,
Mm-hmm.
you believed in the dream, go to high school, graduate from high school, I'm going to go to college. You particularly was able to purchase your home
Mm-hmm.
while you were, explain that scenario if you don't mind.
So I was able to purchase my home, and yes, I have 2 degrees. Yeah, and I had to take out some student loans, but the secret is they only account 1% of your student loan balance. They're not taking the totality of your student loan and say, nope, you out of here, you can't get a home. They're only taking 1%. Let's say, you owe 6 figures. They're only taking 1% of that.
Were you discouraged? Were you? Let me ask you: when you was in school and you like, yo, it's time to buy a house. Like, were you saying to yourself like beforehand, "Oh, I can't," or
No,
did you think like, "It's no way I can get it. It's no way I got all these school loans, pressure of wanting to hurry up and get in the workforce."
no, I wasn't discouraged because number one, I'm probably gonna sound like a spoiled brat. I know my parents was gonna help me. My parents helped me with my house, with deposits, whatever the case is. I knew I have a safety net. And also too, that was always my top 3 goals, forever goals, that I'm gonna own a house. Yes, like I said, I rented a few times. But I knew like the last time when I lived on the East Coast, I said this is the last time I ever live in an apartment. And I said whatever I have to do, when I moved down south, hence why when I stayed with my parents for 2 years, I stacked my money. And I was like, let me just get rid of any type of debt. And I did. Um, and that's when I was like, okay, now I'm gonna buy a house. And didn't know for a long time I was already pre-qualified. But a lot of times people don't have I would say like the safety net that I have, and my parents, being able to help. And at the time too, I was married at the time, so we put both our incomes definitely exceeded, like home ownership. And I would also say in the back of my mind, I know this sounds foul, like if something was to happen, in my marriage, whether not saying divorce or if we got sick or unemployed, I said at least we'll borrow enough and be able to afford the monthly payments of the mortgage. So that's why I tell people like don't go out and get the most expensive house because you never know, you may get unemployed, you may get sick, whatever the case is. So you got to think about affordability for you. That's not gonna kill you. So that's a lot of factors I thought about as well. And like I said, having help. If your parents are able or family members are able, definitely do that. So I definitely
And
wish people.
in that, actually, you touched on another point. One of the key factors is financial instability.
Mhm.
Like you said, understanding that what will happen if I get unemployed? What
Yep.
would happen if I or if my husband was to get sick? And understanding those factors. Let me ask you, and this is key. You brought it up when you was getting those letters at your house, right? Those pre-approvals for all these loans and stuff. A lot of people don't realize that a lot of that stuff be serious.
Oh
They
yeah.
know your credit score because your credit score is out there. It's public information. So they're marketing, but they're also letting you know, like Professor Drea, listen,
Mhm.
you're eligible for such and such.
Mhm.
We don't know if you got the money to put the down payment, and we ain't thinking about all that, but
Right.
you're eligible for these things. And what most of us will appear to look at it as junk mail
Mhm.
is actually them letting you know that you fall within, because of based off your credit, you
Right.
fall into this criteria.
Exactly. Yeah. So always look at your mail and say, okay, wow, this is from a mortgage company. They saying that I'm pre-qualified. Y'all got to think we in the era in which people want to get rid of these homes. They don't want to be sitting on these homes. They want to get rid of them because they're not making money like that. Because it's more of a, I would say, if you look at buying a house, this would be the perfect time to buy a house because I think the interest rates were like 6%, 5% now. So this is
And
a perfect time to
and
buy.
I don't want to get too political, but what's going on now is that you have the president, you have a lot of these governors, and you have a lot of these mayors where they're actually clamping down on these big corporations owning 40 properties,
Mhm.
owning 50 properties, owning 60
Exactly.
properties. So it's we have more homes than people really want to buy when you think about it.
Exactly.
Um, and this I'm gonna ask you this question, and then I'll give you my experience. Neighborhood segregation. One of the great things of having this conversation with you is you're always able to give a perspective that I think a lot of people don't truly understand, because our experience is our experience,
Mhm.
and we tend to think that our personal experience is reality. It
Right.
is our reality. But you grew up in one of the most segregated big cities in America, which is Boston.
Exactly.
So understanding the neighborhood segregation of Boston, and then moving to, I mean, you heard the stories as a young lady, little girl, of Alabama. Alabama. It was like this boogeyman theory.
Uh huh.
Alabama, what you was told. And one of your parents probably didn't want to go back to Alabama. Like my grandmother did never want to go back down to Georgia for nothing. When you decided to buy your home in Alabama, because
Mhm.
you had moved down there, graduated from Tuskegee, prestigious university. Did neighborhood segregation, it wasn't a factor for you?
No, because when I told my relative what type of neighborhood I wanted to live in, I wanted to live in a mixed neighborhood. And
Okay.
then too, it was certain neighborhoods I researched. I said nope. I could have lived the next town over from me, which is more predominantly white. And I looked at some homes, and I seen how the neighbors was like. I said, oh no. I said because I want to come home in peace and not have, if y'all know the story about Bill Russell, how when he played for the Celtics and just the atrocities that happened at his home, I did not want that to happen to me. So my neighborhood is very diverse. My neighborhood is mixed. I throw my hand up at my neighbors. My neighbors know what I do. I know what they do for a living. I work from home, so I'm nosy. I got cameras around my house. Like, okay, pull up if you want. Like in the South, yeah, you live amongst one another. Ain't nobody got time for like, oh, yeah, there's certain areas you don't want to move to because of, maybe a sundown neighborhood, a sundown town. But like you said, Q, I'm from Boston. My neighborhood I grew up in Mattapan, it was when my parents bought their home in Mattapan. It used to be a Jewish neighborhood, and then the flight happened, so my parents bought their home, and my neighborhood was predominantly black. So I'm not talking about Southern black. We talking about West Indians. Like my neighbors across the street, they was Haitian. We had Haitians, Jamaicans, Trinidadians. We probably had like 2 or 3 white folks in our neighborhood. Where I live at now is 50-50. So, no one's not bothering me. No one's not calling me a ninja. No one's throwing trash in my yard. My neighborhood is pristine. It's about like 10 houses. I live like at a dead end. It's quiet. Yeah, you go like 2, 3 blocks, down the hill because, where I live at is like a lot of mountains. It looks different, but you have to live where you live at. Like I had told my relative, and I had to fire my first relative because he wasn't trying to hear none of the demands. I was like, oh, you gotta go. So when I end up hiring a sister, she heard me, and I was like, yo, this is where I want to live at. So you have to be vocal too of where you want to live and do the research. Coming from a segregated city, my parents grew up during Jim Crow era. My mom, her class was the last black class that graduated from Escambia Training High School. So my parents, all they knew was black, 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 black. It was no such thing as, oh, we going across the tracks. And my parents' hometown is the same way. You go across the tracks, that's the white folks' neighborhood. Now black people migrated over there. Now the white people are moving further over. So you just got to know your comfort level, right? And then also too, you have to say what kind of neighborhood you want to live in. Because like I said, in Boston, like you said, one of the most segregated cities. I went there, had bought a house in like South Boston or Charlestown. Oh no! Oh no! No no! Mm-mm.
One of the things my experience was similar, and it speaks about where I'm at in life, how I view the world, my world view of things, and I don't want to be too political. Is that when I decided to move, I lived in what most people that grew up in the area where I lived at first in Pennsylvania, most people said it was a bad area. I didn't see what they saw.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't see, and I still don't see what they see. Because of, being from Jersey, you see different things. So you kind of like, okay, we all think our neighborhood is the roughest and we had it rough. So my thing was when I moved to Pennsylvania, it wasn't no hood where I lived at. It wasn't rough. It wasn't in Philadelphia. It was outside of, in the sticks, as we would say. So when I decided to move, it was more of, okay, we're going to move somewhere. I could have stayed in the same area, but we moved to the next town over. And it is the street I live on is what I consider very diverse,
Mm-hmm.
and me in particular, I grew up where I grew up at as a kid, everybody knew each other.
Mm-hmm.
Families knew each other. It was very tribal. Even if they were not black. You knew the white families that may have lived on your street. You knew the Portuguese families that lived around the corner, a couple blocks up, and you even knew the white families that lived on the other side of town. The town, it was segregated, but not segregated like that. It was more segregated based off of class. Um, so when I moved to where I live now, I still have that. Some people will call it naive friendliness. I'm very friendly. I know how to speak to people. When you see them, when they're sitting on the porch, I have neighbors that I have a neighbor. They sit on the porch. They were sitting on the porch this morning at 5:30 in the morning, husband and wife. I spoke to them. They spoke back. So I was very friendly with my neighbors when I first moved in. I've been here about 2 years now. So I didn't have to worry about what they consider segregation. One of the guys that owned the house across the street from me, he bought his home a couple months after I bought mine. And he had to move because of his job. He was in the Army. And he wound up renting to a family a couple months after he bought the house. And, so they were real nice. The guy that lived in the back of me, where I park at, he's super duper nice. We talk when he's outside. No, I'm coming and going. We talk, shoveling snow, doing the grass, all that stuff is like, those are my neighbors. Like, I don't have that discourse. And I understand a lot of people have issues with their neighbors.
Right.
My neighbors is all types of people. You got Latino, a couple Latino families, for about every 3 houses, it may be a black family, it might be a white family, it might be Portuguese. Very, very good street. Actually, where I live at, it's like 2 houses before, like a side street corner. So it might be a cop right there waiting to see if anybody, because it has a stop sign in the middle of my street. So it's like a cop that park right there. So when I go around the corner to get in my truck, I'll see him. So understand that and really having that community feel.
Right.
I was going to do anyway, because if I got to stay here 30, 40 years, I'm going to be comfortable.
Exactly.
A lot of people buy homes and they be like, they ain't comfortable. What?
Right.
You paid for your happiness. You should be trying to be as comfortable as possible.
Yeah, they have buyer's remorse. That's one thing too. I was like, I do not want to have buyer's remorse. Like you said, I want to be comfortable. I speak to my neighbors. I even helped one of my neighbors, a black gentleman, killed 2 snakes. Yeah, So I had to do that. So that's just the type of neighborhood I live in. Like, hey, what you need, no problem. We look out for each other.
So as we begin to continue to talk about this, right? Let me ask you: did you? Like it's crazy because we sometimes we buy our homes. I didn't do a historical research of the area I live in because sometimes, for example, when my where I grew up at, there was a history of redlining, and I never knew that. I mean, like I say about our parents and our elders, they give you enough to know to survive. They don't tell you everything because some things you ain't supposed to know, because you ain't old enough to be able to process the information. So when we talk about redlining, a lot of people don't know that redlining was so severe, so extreme that it still exists. It's still there.
Right.
Where you've been excluded from this area for so long. When you move to a certain area, it's foreign. People giving you the look like, you sure you want to live on the street?
Right.
You sure? I'm quite sure you, Professor Drea, and myself, we've been the 4th or 5th black person in the class. Not a predominantly black class. A lot of people don't understand that dynamic. I remember I was telling somebody a while ago that I remember Sicilian women and guys used to tell me they don't mess with the other Italians. I'm like, what do you mean? We Sicilian, they Neapolitan. We don't mess with them. I'm like, y'all Italian. They're like, nah, we don't mess with them like that. Even that dynamic of classism.
Right.
Let me ask you a question.
Exactly.
Lower mortgage approval. What's your thoughts on that?
I think that's the most stressful. I think that's the most stressful process is mortgage approval, especially once again you're going through the process of you already going through the fear of do I qualify, the mortgage approval, and I think a lot of times people get discouraged if they're getting their mortgage through a bank. You still have banks like you mentioned still practice these bias, discrimination, and as far as with declining your mortgage, sometimes you got to go the route of going through a mortgage company, and that's okay. And I thought I had some data on that, on like how many people get declined as far as they're going through a bank. I guess I don't have the data on that, but it's a chunk in which across the board that people get denied. But that's when you get through that process, that you good to go. It's just like once again, you gotta have your I's dot and T's crossed. A lot of times too, let's keep it real. A lot of people want to they want to do shortcuts. When you buying a house, you cannot do shortcuts. And you can't be
Mm.
like, oh, like they decide not to do this. Don't give up. Don't go through a bank. And you talking about Wells Fargo or Bank of America, in which, I think they got programs now that's catering to, our folks. When I'm talking about our folks, black folks, first home buyers. I think Bank of America do, and I'm pretty sure Wells Fargo because they're trying to, rebuild. Like we got the title here, their brand,
Rebuild their brand, right?
rebuild their brand.
Let me ask you. Let me ask you because you bring that up, right? Do you think because my issue, my biggest hang up with it, and when you start to really understand it, is knowledge,
Mm-hmm.
having the correct information. Uh, like I said, a lot of inner cities they have city banks within their cities who cater to people that live in the city, cater
Mm-hmm.
to like having a local credit union. Let me ask you, do you think it's literally like, yo, people just don't know like all this stuff? Like you can literally, you might get a FHA loan.
Right.
FHA loan, the bank may have something going on. Like you may have like six different things that you could fall for, and you fit in the criteria, and you can activate all six of them. Where basically you walking out the house with practically nothing, being eligible to upgrade your home in 3-4 years. Do you think that? Why do you think this information is not readily available for people, or like,
I'm about to go there. I'm about to go there. You know
oh
why?
yeah,
Because people, this is why this is you. We research what's important to us. Let's keep it real. What's important to you, you may be on it, you may be researching, find the fine print, everything. And I always say if people can go online, talk ish all day long, go on, do TikToks, do all these things, you can research, you can do your Googles and research about home ownership in my area, what programs. Then also too, I listen to a lot of like local news, like, and I be hearing all the time, oh yeah, this Saturday, this Sunday coming up, we having first home buyer classes for free 99. You go there, it probably be like five people. And you hear it on the news, you see them broadcasted on social media, but what you are into, that's what you're gonna gravitate towards too. Also, too, Q, a lot of people don't do this. One of my superpowers is active listening. I listen a lot. What if I don't want to listen? I listen a lot to my elders. That's like my uncles, my great uncles, my parents, and I'll be like, oh, okay, word, that's what you can do. I
you
listen to
know, you know, one of the things, right? And this would be a different conversation, and I don't want to take the conversation somewhere else. Is we all remember back in the day when the insurance man used to come to the crib, right? And a lot of people got beat by the
Mhm.
insurance man, and then and I'll talk about the other scheme. And I'll say it. I'm glad that they cracked down on it. One of the things that was famous about 15 years ago was the reverse mortgages
Yep.
and how they took advantage of the seniors with these reverse mortgages because the seniors were on fixed income. So
Mhm.
when you have a senior who knows that their grandkids' graduation or their kid's wedding is coming up, they're going to take a loan against that house, get a reverse mortgage, take a loan on that house, another loan to try to get the gift, but they're on a fixed income.
Right.
So they may pass away, unfortunately, and then their family's stuck with this bill or they're going to lose the house.
Mm-hmm.
So knowing the history of people getting schemed and scammed and swindled out of stuff, I think that a lot of times, like you said, you'll see it even on Facebook or Instagram, where a particular seminar is being held in your area, and it might be like $25 entry fee, and you're like, I'm not going to get. Why do I got to pay $25 to get information that's supposed to be free?
Mm-hmm.
However, the information there is worth way more than $25, and it's going to teach you and give you the information to have all these resources.
Mm-hmm.
I do believe that in a lot of respects, it's a fear thing.
Mm-hmm.
It's a fear that people have with history. Somebody in their family lost a house for whatever particular reason, not realizing. Like I know quite a few people who are really eligible to this day for the GI Bill, but they don't even realize it, and they don't take advantage of the opportunity to get a GI Bill, and then think about, oh well, somebody, this, that, and the third.
Right. And they get 0% VA loan. So, it's like some people, they don't, like you said, they don't take advantage of it. Some people not even connected to the VA. And I'm like, if you have a certain time, you should get connected, just to get all the benefits, because you got wear and tear on your mind, body, and spirit. So why not take advantage of, those different loans that you have served your country and you went through, heck and back. So yeah, like if I'm eligible to get a 0% interest VA loan, no doubt. But once again, like you said, it's fear, it's miseducation, it's uneducation. And a lot of these banks, honestly, if they was predatory towards us, like Bank of America, they offer free classes. Wells Fargo, Chase, I'll take them classes. I'll take them for free 99. Yeah, I'll take if I have to do this process again, I would take those classes, because yeah, you took advantage of my community. So now I'm gonna learn everything that you're gonna teach me. But a lot of times, we got to get past the fear, because fear that keeps you stagnant. It keeps you stuck. It keeps you this in perpetual vicious cycle. And I get it. Some people are afraid to have that. It's a great responsibility to own a home, to even peel back the layers of your credit, to even say you may not even have credit. You may been one of those situations in which people put the cable in your name when you were 6 years old. So it's just so much things that we have to get past. And to be honest with you, a lot of these people, like you said, our counterparts who's white, don't get it twisted. A lot of times they waiting for their parents or grandparents to pass away, because they know that house is going to get passed down to them. And we don't take great responsibility of, if our parents pass on, we really kind of sometimes squander the hard work that they did and say, well, I'm gonna sell this house for $10, and you don't have a house to live in.
I may ruffle some feathers with what I'm about to say. I don't know no family that hasn't lost a house.
That's good.
I don't know no family that haven't lost a home. Every family that I know, for any particular reason, have lost a home. So this is why this home ownership, definitely for a lot of our elders, were so big. Right. We have to understand that even if they didn't migrate from the South, buying a home in the 60s and 70s were big for our parents, grandparents, the 50s. You may own land. Like I know a lot of people who had farmland.
Mm-hmm.
And depending on this urban renewal and when these highways got built, they came through and, eminent domain, and they decided to not understand, okay, they may be coming through. Don't sell all your land, just have it pushed back. I know a family where 95 ran right through. They owned a bunch of land in Miami, and 95 came racing through all that land in Miami, and they wound up selling it and lost out on. They would probably be millionaires right now, the family,
Mm.
if they would have held on and because right now Miami, anybody that knows that area, Miami's changed over the last 40 years. It was a totally different city
Mhm.
40 years ago. So I do think the information, for those that's watching, appreciate you guys,
Yeah.
because this is not more of, we're not putting information out there like giving you real estate advice because we don't know your personal situation,
Right.
but understanding that this was the people that came before us, this was their access to wealth. What most people, the catchy phrase now, generational wealth, generational wealth was not working uh, 70 hours a week.
Mm-mm.
Generational wealth for them was getting a nice, affordable car if they wanted to get a car. But some of them even bought homes before they bought cars
Yep.
because the home
That-
ownership was so important because they understood equity. They understood
Mhm.
that I'm going to buy a home and I'm going to leave it to my kids and they're going to do for so I'm going to leave them something or put them in a better situation than I had.
Right.
So, Professor Drea, you did a lot of research.
Yeah,
Know?
because I'm passionate about this, and I wanted to mention this too because this was 1865, 1877, so this is Reconstruction area. So some research that I came across said newly freed Black families sought loan ownership immediately after slavery, right? Because land, like you mentioned, Q, it represented freedom, safety, and economic independence. And also, this is when churches and communities was working together to often pool this by, property, land, homes. And I think a lot of times, I know I was watching something, this is a while ago, about the benevolent fund when it came to churches, especially in the South. That money was going towards buying land and also burying your loved ones. But even this could be a whole nother topic of discussion. Some churches have moved away from that. And with some people now, they can't even go to a church and say, hey, I'm behind in my rent or my mortgage. They're not even helping with rental or mortgage assistance. So,
Mm.
it's just like our ancestors have to really do the grassroots. And somewhere down the line, we got it we got it confused in which you don't even want your folks to stay at your house. You can have like 4 or 5 bedrooms. You like, oh, they ain't staying here. Then if they stay there for the weekend, when y'all leaving? Because like I said, when my parents went to Boston, it's like they was destitute. They stayed with my great aunt. And like I said, even now, a lot of my family members on both sides, my dad's side and my mom's side, live in Boston now because of my parents. They was like, hey, all 10 of us gonna live here together. We putting our resources together, to the point a lot of them still live in Boston and still, own their homes. We got away from, communal living, but you kind of seeing it now because of just like you said, the way that the societal.
Circumstances making people like, yo, we need everybody to live under one roof. The circumstances push, and it's funny because circumstances back then made people live together and on basically what we would say everybody lives in the same under the same roof, and
Mhm.
we got to the point where we got so independent and feeling like I got to get away from my family, like my family is the problem, that we all wanted to have some type of independence and not living around each other or even under the same roof, and understanding like, okay, like if you want to get you want to get a duplex, why would you and your sister or you and your brother or you and your cousin not buy the duplex together?
Exactly. And I never get that. I never understand that. Like when I was living in Boston, like legit, like my uncle and my aunt on my dad's side, like we all lived in Mattapan. Like I could legit walk to all their homes. And when my grandmother came up from Alabama, like she stayed with my aunt. And then, like my uncle, they bought a 3 family house in which all my cousins, they each lived on the floor. So we kind of moved away from that. But like you said, we seeing that shifting back because of, like you said, circumstances. And also too, a lot of us maybe millennials or Gen X, in which our parents are Asian, they may have to come live with us. So we seeing a shift in with us becoming the caregivers, and our parents have to come live with us, or just even people falling on hard times. But like you said, people like I don't want to deal with my family; they gotta go. Like I said, I'm thankful that even though I have my home, like my dad has his home, and if anything, let's say, was to happen to myself, my brothers, or my siblings, whatever, we know that we got a place to stay at my dad's house. So, a lot of people can't say that because once again, it's like, well, you got to pull yourself up by the bootstrap. But now you're seeing that whole narrative changing, and folks have to come together now because things are just uncertain.
Yeah, very, very interesting. So, Professor Drea, you have anything? We could definitely continue this conversation. I'm quite sure we'll have more to bring to it next week, and if I think that the conversation is needed, I know that I would welcome those who have joined us to give us some feedback about home ownership. Some people don't want to own a home ever. They're like, you know what, like you said, I don't want that burden. I just want to just come and go and understand. And even now, when you are a renter, I remember when I first moved to Pennsylvania, the ways of renting in the last 12 years have changed. It was so easy to rent 12 years ago. Now you got to go through a lot of stuff. It has, I would call it, is New Jersey rules now. New Jersey rules would be 2.5 months security. Like they basically don't trust you. So those of us that may have didn't have different credit, you may have had a record prior. Where your record, when you sit back and think about it, if you do have a record, your record could disqualify you from renting.
Hmm.
So you may want to never buy a home, but there may be so many obstacles put in your way to just rent.
Hmm.
And renting may be easier for you, but it may be harder for you to rent than it is to buy a home. So,
Exactly. And I was gonna say that too. Like renting has become very difficult because I know I was talking to my nail tech. She's renting a home and she was saying they still gotta be responsible for cutting the grass and doing other paying other utilities. I'm like, if you and your husband, I said, I know you make good money, your husband make good money. I said, y'all gotta look at that credit and buy a house. I said, because if y'all doing all that now, then y'all can go buy a house instead of renting and you giving the money, you making the landlord more wealthier. So, like whenever I talk to people, I just give them food for thought. I'm not saying, oh, you got to do what I do because everybody's circumstance is different. Like you said, Q, everybody's circumstance is different. But if you already doing like the maintenance, if the landlord saying, yo, you got to do the maintenance, you got to do the upkeep. And I think people are afraid of that. Yes, when you own a home, that's all on you,
yeah,
to
you may
maintain
have a
that
city,
home.
you may have a city ordinance that your grass got to be cut a certain height. Like that stuff is serious. You get the
Yes.
wrong inspector, and some of those inspectors will be crawls. You may, and nowadays, right? And I know you know about this. Nowadays, where you live at might have a Facebook group, and the group will take pictures of your house and be like, "Who lives in?" It's very easy to find out who lives in the house. It's not hard to
Mhm.
find out who lives nowhere, right? But they'll
Mhm.
take a picture of your house and be like, "The town need to go around there and find them." And it's like, oh yeah. So I get
Yeah.
it. I truly understand it. But at the end of the day, when you talk about understanding the legacy that you may want to live and leave, because I know a lot of people don't want to leave a legacy or want to leave like they just good, and it's okay. We're not sitting here, like I said in the beginning, Professor Dre and myself. We're not sitting here wagging our finger at you.
Mhm.
That's not the case. But one of the things that you probably might want to consider is home ownership and understanding how it. I'm not going to say it unlocks the key to the door, but it gives you some type of what we would say some type of entitlement to something that you own that doesn't particularly lose value. Like when you buy a car, as soon as you go for the lot, it loses value. So just getting that understanding and putting that into perspective. So, Professor Dre, any final thoughts?
No, it was a good conversation. Like we have mentioned, everybody knows their own individual circumstances. So really just, take a look at your circumstances. But even if you're like, hey, I don't want to own a house right now, still look at your credit. Still be mindful of your credit. Still be mindful of, what you're purchasing, bunker down. Sometimes, like I say, the whole key to this thing is it's okay if you have to do communal living with your parents, grandparents, because things are shifting, and we need each other more than now. So sometimes we got to take that pride down and be humble. So that's just my last thoughts, and it was just a good conversation. So thank y'all for checking us out.
Yes. Appreciate you guys. And as usual, every Wednesday, we have what we call the Academia Report with myself and Professor Drea. We just wanted to bring this conversation to all of us, to getting, like she said, to getting us to understand um, some of the things that are at play, because a lot of times, and when we're consumed with social media, and this was the conversation I had with Professor Drea prior, 99% of the stuff on social media is negative. You are being every day, in every aspect, you are the target, the consumer target, to being emotionally triggered or financially triggered to get you to spend that money, that the money that you have in your pocket. You're as the young kids say, you're the op, and everything is geared towards triggering you. So we want to have this conversation to get people to get you and I, so we could recalibrate and focus on what we may need to do that may be important for us all. So appreciate you guys in the chat. Appreciate you guys. Appreciate you guys. Appreciate you guys. Remember, the best way to support the channel is to like, share, subscribe, and we will see you next Wednesday. With that, take care. Have a great week.